Hello guys, so this is going to be the second part of the video for today's session, but it's going to be the third part for the topic of unique American literature. So we're gonna try to cover this as quick as possible so you get the idea of the general idea of what the writers of verse that is for this video, it's all about, and then you can move to the link that is the mural link where you are going to complete you're required to complete 3 tasks, and I'm going to record a video to give you the instructions as well for that video. Yes, so we're gonna start. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and I'm going to move to share this one. Hold on. So we're gonna cover all of this. Yes, so hopefully I'm sharing my screen, and we're gonna talk a bit about the writers of verse. In the previous video, we talked about the writers of prose. And if you want to have that clear, I will make an invitation to Google and find the difference of prose and verse, which is totally different. So go and expand your knowledge on the difference or key difference between prose and verse. All right, so the aforementioned authors of the American literary identity were writers of prose, and the American public wanted representation in verse as well. So the answer came with the fireside poet. You have the authors of the New American literary identity. Basically, the previous video that we discussed about the identity of prose and the identity of American of the United States, basically. And in this one, the public wanted more format of verse. And as a result, we have the fireside poets. What are the fireside poets? Basically, they're also known as the household poets of a schoolroom poets. Included in this group, we have Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, William Cullen Bryant, John Greenfield Whitley, James Russell Lowell, and Oliver Wendell Holmes. So we're going to try to cover all of these guys, but this movement as the fireside poets, I'm sorry, I must say that we have all of these guys. If you want to expand, and this is going to be very helpful for you to complete the task. If you want to expand on the specific details for each of them, you're welcome to. And we're gonna take a look at, so in this one, like we're gonna take a look at the name here for a second: fireside poets, household poets, schoolroom poets. So you just name it itself as you prefer. But it has basically a nice tone to it. At least for the first 2 poet writers in here, at least for Henry and for William. So fireside poets, household poets, schoolroom poets, call it what you want. But they're poets that were bred at home, in school, and were very, very well known around the way. It's like, for example, it's equivalent to our Alfredo Espino. For example, if you read about Alfredo Espino back in school, so people back then in the United States were reading about Wadsworth, were reading about Bryant, Whittier, Lowell, and Wendell. Basically, those were the names that, so here, if you have Alfredo Espino, Claudia Lars, so this is the equivalent of these guys back then in this period of time in the United States. Yeah, so just to make it clear, we're talking about poets here, and we got a picture of them, and you can see that they look very old, very dead. And it's basically the derogative title of picture, a photograph that we were mentioning in the previous video. If you want to know a little bit more about this type of photograph, you're welcome to Google it. It's called daguerreotypes photograph. That is basically this type of photograph. So that's the name that is given. So before cable TV, social media, and YouTube, and even the radio, there was a time when families and friends will sit around the fire and share in verse, share poems. Thus appeared the name of this group, poets. the word fireside. And this word fireside basically is taken from the experience of sharing poems and sharing verses um, alongside or next to the fireplace as a family. So the word fireside was also used in the title of some of these poetry collection, which is quite interesting. Despite all of this talk of originality that we were mentioning in the prose part, that it's the authenticity of the elements of the American literature and the forge of a new identity and looking for a new, basically, way of expressing themselves that is unique to the United States and it represents the American values. So despite all of this talk of originality, some consider their style not purely autochthonous in the same regard as the aforementioned writers of prose. So in this one, in the prose, remember that we were mentioning about the originality and just taking some ideas as inspiration. But in this part of the verse, the writers of verse, or what you are considered to be the poet, so they were seen as a mirror of great British poets of the time, such as Shelley, Keats, and Lord Byron. So we're not in American British literature course. So, but if you want to expand, or if you did cover this in the the British course, British literature course. So that's gonna be very helpful to understand the idea of what we're talking here and what were these American writers mirroring, basically. Yes. So, however, despite some similarities in form, and remember when we talk about like a piece of work, a piece of literary work, we talk about form, we talk about style, and we talk about meter. And basically, they were similar to the British poetry. The fireside poets were extremely unpopular throughout the 19th century, that is the 1800s or something like that, century for their accessibility and thematic appeal. The subject matter was focused on the here and now of those times. So basically, they were talking about what they were living at the moment, the ideal. I'm sorry for that. Motorcycle. I apologize for that. So basically, as all of the writers, they were writing about, or most of the writers that we studied in this course, they were writing about what they were living at the moment. The poems were about home and hearth, politics and daily life, and were written to a general audience without solipsism and esoteric significance. So this is very important you pay attention to. Yes, so pretty much it's something to have an idea of this. This is a nice hint for you to Google it and to add it to the glossary if you're not familiar with the term solipsism and esoteric, two new words, and hearth also. That will be a nice idea, a nice addition to the conversation in the glossary section. That's going to be very helpful, and I would really appreciate to the person that does this research. So solipsism in writing to yourself, writing so no one else understand. It's just about you. That's basically the idea of solipsism. It's writing about you, even though nobody else is understand. But if you want to have like a clearer definition, Google it. Sometimes, for example, I write about to express myself. I don't care what other people think about like my writing. And for example, your journal, you have solipsism sometimes over there if you write your own stories. So this is not that way. It's not esoteric. This type of writing is not esoteric. It's not, there's not a small, tiny metaphysical meaning in here, or cosmological, or cosmogonic. Like nothing of those crazy stuff that comes out later that we're gonna talk about. I don't think, yeah, we're gonna look at, we're not gonna talk about, we're gonna look at with some writers, which it's beautiful, it's in its own way, but this is not, this type of verses are not in that particular way. So the topics were about home, health, hearth, politics and daily life, pretty much. Some, nevertheless, criticize the depth and scale of the quality of poems produced and desire the writers to explore beyond the structure, versification, and rhythm. So people in audiences were basically asking for a more structured and elaborated type of verse. And back then it was very demanding because remember, we're not having YouTube, Netflix, we don't have Facebook, we don't have WhatsApp. So the only way of communicating is through letters, is through ports, prose, or is it's through verses. So that's the way of entertainment here. We're not talking about Netflix. I mean, nothing that what we have today, it's related to this. And I think this is a personal opinion. I think that one of the reasons we do not appreciate writing, or we do not appreciate reading the same way previous generations did, is because previous generations didn't have all of the elements, gadgets, technology, and different way of entertainment. And writing and reading was their way of entertaining themselves. And I don't know, like, we're not to blame, we're not the ones to blame, but you know, it's just development and evolution. That's personal opinion over there. Don't pay attention if you want. Okay, yes, so we're gonna move on. Yet it was such a structure that gave these poems their fame. In this case, we're talking about rhythm and structure. They were relatively easy to memorize and recite, and their cadence was attractive to the ear and at home as well in school. As an example, here's the first stanza of the poem She Came and Went by James Russell Lowell. We're gonna quickly read this stanza. As a twig trembles which a bird, lights on the scene, then lips unbent. So it's my memory thrilled and stirred. I only know she came and went. So in this part, basically it's very, very simple, but it's got a nice sound to it. For example, look at the words verb, stirred, unbent, went. The structure in here and the type of rhyme in here, it's AV, AV. Probably you studied this in Latin American culture, the structure of the rhyme, that is AV, AV. Or in Spanish would be la estructura de la rima, que es como el ABA. Entonces, si estudiaron eso en literatura latinoamericana y si pusieron atención a esos temas de rima, tipos de rima sonante, estructura, va a ser muy útil que lo entiendan porque básicamente estamos replicando el mismo concepto de rima y estructura, right? Anyway, so the type of verse is a short verse. Actually, this is a stanza and it's easy to memorize. And you wanted something easy to memorize because, you know, era dirigido a las familias. Entonces, querés algo que sea catchy, algo que sea bonito, algo que sea corto y algo que sea fácil de replicar. So this is basically a very good example of the fireside poems type of content that they were producing at this point. Now we have William Cullen Bryant. He was one of the fireside poets. He's considered one of the first romantic writers. Remember that in the background section, that is the previous class, we talk about the background that it says, okay, el periodo romántico no necesariamente, I'm going to say this in Spanish para que les quede claro, right? El periodo romántico no necesariamente es poesía melancólica. Si se fijan, en este periodo hemos catalogado también al Jinete sin Cabeza de Sleepy Hollow. ¿Por qué? Porque es el tipo de redacción que tiene. El tipo de redacción, y solo para que quede claro, ¿verdad? Eso es prosa y esto es verso. El video anterior hablamos sobre la prosa y este video sobre el verso. Entonces, just a consideration, el verso es más estructurado, es usualmente en poesía, lleva estructura, ritmo, melodía, o sea, un montón de cosas que tenés que tomar en consideración. Y usualmente hay ciertas estructuras y esto, otra vez, tú creería que lo estudiaron en literatura latinoamericana, por eso no me detendré a hablar sobre los tipos de versos, tipos de rima, sonante, consonante. No, me imagino que ustedes están familiarizados. Si quieren tener una discusión sobre esto y aprender un poquito más, podemos en el chat del campus perfectamente me pueden consultar y podemos tener esa discusión. Anyways, entonces, para aclarar, no necesariamente because it says romantic period, no estamos hablando de un periodo de Romeo y Julieta, right? No ese tipo de romance, ¿me entienden? Y no estamos hablando de un periodo de romance ni siquiera cercano a los 50 sombras de Grey. Eso nada que ver. Estamos hablando de periodo romántico. Sí, en prosa es un poquito más oscuro y en verso es un poquito más vivencial. O lo que llamaríamos ahora algo comercial, o sea, para consumo del pueblo. All right, so this is the guy, the picture of this guy. This is a very old guy, and you're gonna find a lot of pictures of these type of people, like old people, you know, writing poetry. This fella was also the editor of the New York Evening Post. But before we move to that specific content, you can see the way it's photographed. One more time, photography is very cool in here. And also the way that is very sharp in the beginning. Very sharp here, it's in this side of his face, and then it kind of gets blurry behind it. Some of the irregularities in the photography of the era. So that's the first, you know, this is photography, guys, but at the very beginning. Los primeros tipos de fotografía, un retrato. Entonces, no sé, dato curioso ahí por si a ustedes les interesa. As I said before, he was also editor of the New York Evening Post and worked in journalism for 50 years. His first book of poetry was entitled Poems. Voy a hacer un libro de poesía y le voy a llamar Poemas. Very original, very creative. Yo creo que no había otra forma de llamarlo, ¿verdad? So, pero tomemos en consideración que son de los primeros poemas, okay, de este ciclo. So his poetry has been described as meditative. His most famous poem is Thanatopsis, but it's Thanatopsis, I wanted to clarify here, so you can add it or you can Google it, but it's basically a reflection on death, una reflexión de la muerte. Cuando escuches el término Thanatopsis, es básicamente algún tipo de reflexión, ya sea escrita, oral, acerca de la muerte. In it, he says that we should not fear the end, as it is a natural process of nature and of life. And les voy a compartir un excerpt, una parte de esto para que lo podamos analizar. Hold on. Great. So I have some of my notes in here. Okay. It says, yet not to the thine eternal resting place shall thou retire alone, nor calls the which, which more magnificent, thou shall lie down with patriarchs of the infant world, with kings, the powerful of the earth, the wise, the good, fair forms, and hoary years of age past, all in one mighty sepulchre. I would love if you could get like the essence, because we have a lot of vocabulary, new vocabulary. I think it's new vocabulary in here for you. But if you get the equivalent or the translation to it, and if you want to share with the class, that will be very cool as well. If you want to have an entry, then this is for the Gazette, okay? Remember that the Gazette for this term, it's going to be optional. So for these segments, if you want to help y escribir una entrada en el blog del Gazette, haciendo una equivalencia de la traducción, entonces lo consideraré para sus créditos extra, ¿verdad? Entonces, if you are interested, si alguien quiere hacerlo, y el primero que lo haga se lleva el crédito, ¿verdad? Para este. Y también vamos a dar la oportunidad para esta otra parte. Some lines from other fireside poets. Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. Daily Trials by a Sensitive Man. Storms, thunders, waves, howl, crash, and below till ye get your fill. Sometimes rest never can be still, but in the graves. Okay? If you want to get an equivalent of this, y si otra persona quiere sacar el equivalente y ponerlo en el blog de Gazette, a la primera persona perfectamente le vamos a dar el crédito. Como les digo, eso es opcional. Y son unidades, actividades extra. John Greenleaf Whittier, Flowers in Winter. How strange to greet in the frosty morn, graceful counterfeit of flower. These children of the meadows born of sunshine and of showers. So you can see the rhyming here. It's basically, es la misma estructura. En estos versos podemos ver la misma estructura. Estructura A, B, A, B. ¿Y cómo podemos ver eso? Otra vez. Vemos la última palabra, more, born. Y luego tenemos estructura BB, sería flower, showers. ¿Ok? Entonces, otra vez, sigue este mismo patrón. Corto, breve, catchy para las personas que lo reciten y estructurado, porque no es un verso libre, es un verso que lleva un proceso. Entonces, y lleva una estructura, y lleva un tipo de rima. Okay. So basically, this is everything, guys. Si ustedes, no sé, tienen alguna otra duda o consulta o quieren que les comparta estructuras sobre rima, sonante, estructuración por versos, no sé, cualquier cosa, ustedes al respecto de esto perfectamente me lo pueden solicitar. Por cuestiones de tiempo no me puedo expandir en eso. ¿Verdad? Pero tal vez, sí, creo que está programado en los talleres de workshops, que es parte de sus evaluaciones, que es el 15% de su laboratorio. Entonces, ya que hemos terminado este segmento de Unique American Literature, recuerden, son 3 partes. El primer video es la sesión anterior, que son los antecedentes, cuáles fueron los precedentes o de qué estamos hablando con ese movimiento. El video anterior, que era sobre los autores de la prosa, y en este video que son autores del verso en este periodo en específico del periodo romántico. Ok, chicos, espero que ayudarles un poquito para que entendamos mejor sobre los diferentes autores, nos pongamos también en contexto y empecemos a preparar los diferentes elementos para su presentación, su proyecto final. Recuerden que su proyecto final es una exposición virtual donde ustedes van a hablar sobre autores, si quieren agregar sobre tipos de rimas, si quieren hablar sobre poemas en específico, si quieren hablar sobre movimientos en específico, como este grupo de poetas, si quieren poner datos curiosos sobre el tipo de fotografía, como les estaba mencionando, que se tomaba en ese tiempo. O sea, todo este tipo de información es de irla preparando para que no, o sea, los conozco, o sea, que son procrastinadores y dejan todo a último momento. Y se les va a acumular, y es mucho porque son diferentes autores, diferentes movimientos que nosotros vamos a estar viendo. Si quieren expandir su conocimiento sobre los tipos de, otra vez, rimas, perfectamente me lo pueden hacer, la consulta. Si quieren aprender un poquito más sobre los poemas en específico, o ustedes quieren hacer su presentación sobre los poemas, o un salón exclusivo sobre poesía del periodo romántico, perfectamente lo pueden hacer, o prosa del periodo romántico y expandir en su exposición como proyecto final, como grupo, que todavía no me han enviado todos los nombres de los integrantes del grupo, si se van a mantener en los mismos grupos o si van a cambiar. Entonces, eso es todo por hoy, chicos. Hay un último video, pero eso es con respecto a las indicaciones de la clase. Les agradezco, pasen una feliz tarde.